I used to believe that some people were simply lucky. Lucky in love. Lucky in work. Lucky in timing. I thought I was one of them. Because from the outside, my life looked perfect. I was married to a brilliant woman. Not just brilliant, powerful, respected, admired, feared, even. She was the CEO of a fast-growing company that we had built together from nothing. A company that started as an idea on a coffee-stained notebook, turned into late-night planning sessions, then into rented office space, and finally into a real building with our logo shining on the glass doors. And I was there at every step. Not behind her. Beside her. When we met, neither of us had money. Neither of us had connections. All we had was ambition, energy, and a shared dream. We didn't just fall in love, we built something together. We argued about strategy over dinner. We celebrated milestones with cheap wine on the office floor. We worked weekends, holidays, birthdays. We told each other, one day, this will all be worth it. And slowly, it was. The company grew. Investors came in. Employees multiplied. Media articles mentioned her name. Eventually, she became CEO. And I became head of operations, the person who made sure her vision actually worked in the real world. She was the mind. I was the engine. She spoke on stages. I built systems. She negotiated deals. I made sure those deals didn't collapse. We were a team. At least, that's what I believed. At work, people looked at us like a power couple. They whispered when we walked by. Not in a bad way, in an impressed way. Did you see them? They're incredible. Goals. People told me how lucky I was. Your wife is amazing. She's a legend. She runs the place. I smiled and nodded every time. Because I believed it too. At home, she was different. Softer. Warmer. Human. She took off the armor when she walked through the door. Or at least, I thought she did. We talked about the future. Children. Travel. Early retirement. We talked about buying a house near the ocean one day. About stepping away from the chaos and living simply. She said she wanted peace. I believed her. I trusted her with everything. My heart. My career. My identity. I didn't see her as the CEO. I saw her as my wife. The woman I loved. The woman I defended. The woman I supported when the pressure was too heavy. When she was exhausted, I made dinner. When she doubted herself, I reminded her who she was. When she felt overwhelmed, I carried the weight for her. I thought that's what love was. Two people carrying each other. But what I didn't realize was that while I was carrying her, she was slowly letting go of me. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It happened quietly, subtly, in ways you don't notice until it's too late. She started staying late at the office more often. At first, it made sense. We were growing fast. New markets. New hires. New problems. She was always working. So I didn't question it. Then she stopped answering her phone at night. Meetings ran late. Battery died. I forgot to check. Reasonable explanations. So I accepted them. Then she stopped telling me details. She used to come home and tell me everything. Who said what? Which investor was difficult? Which manager impressed her? Then one day, she stopped. Her answers became shorter. Fine. Busy. Tiring. She became distant. Not cold. Just not close. And I told myself it was stress. Pressure. The cost of leadership. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was lucky. Because everyone told me I was lucky. But there was something else I didn't want to admit. The power had changed her. Not in obvious ways. Not in cruel ways. In subtle ways. She stopped asking for my opinion. She stopped needing my input. She stopped seeing me as a partner. and started seeing me as an employee. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. It was in the way she spoke to me at work. Shorter, sharper, more formal. In meetings, she would interrupt me, correct me, override me, publicly. At first, I told myself it was business, not personal. But when business and marriage share the same walls, it's never just business. The imbalance grew. She gained more authority, more influence, more control. And I stayed where I was. The one making things run, but no longer the one being seen. And slowly, invisibly, the relationship shifted. From we to she. From partnership to hierarchy. From love to power. I didn't notice it because I didn't want to. Because noticing it would mean admitting something was wrong. And admitting something was wrong would mean admitting I might lose everything. So I ignored it. I stayed loyal. I stayed supportive. I stayed blind. I never imagined she would use her power against me. I never imagined she would choose her position over our relationship. I never imagined she would choose someone else over me. And I certainly never imagined that she would erase me on Christmas Eve. But before that happened, before the suspension, before the betrayal became visible, there was one thing I held on to more than anything else. Trust. I trusted her. Completely. And that trust was exactly what made the fall so devastating. Because when someone you trust holds power over you, they don't need to attack you. They just need to decide that you no longer matter. The strange thing about betrayal is that you usually feel it before you see it. It begins as a quiet discomfort. A soft unease you can't explain. Nothing is wrong, but nothing feels right either. That was how it started for me. A feeling. A small shift in the air. A sense that I was no longer standing beside my wife, but behind her. I noticed it in the pauses. In the way she stopped finishing her sentences around me. In the way her phone became something private, something she guarded. She used to leave it on the table. Face up. Unlocked. Now it never left her hand. Or it was face down. Or suddenly locked. A small thing. But small things are how truth announces itself. She started smiling at messages she wouldn't show me. Not openly hiding them. Just angling the screen away. Just tilting her body slightly. Just enough that I noticed. But not enough that I could accuse. And that's the cruel part. Betrayal rarely gives you something solid to hold on to. It gives you shadows. It gives you hints. It gives you feelings that make you question your own sanity. So you silence yourself. You tell yourself you're imagining it. You tell yourself you're insecure. You tell yourself, don't be that person. So I wasn't. I stayed quiet. Until I couldn't anymore. It happened 3 days before Christmas. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a shocking moment. In the most ordinary way possible. She left her laptop open. That was it. No secret passwords. No hacking. No spying. Just a glowing screen on the dining table while she took a phone call in the other room. I walked past it. And I wasn't trying to look. But when you see your own name in a message thread that isn't sent to you, your eyes stop. Your body stops. Your world stops. The subject line was simple. Be careful, he's starting to notice. My name wasn't written. But I was the only he that mattered. My heart started beating faster. Not because I wanted to catch her. But because I didn't want what I was about to find to be true. I told myself I would only glance. Just enough to reassure myself. Just enough to prove I was paranoid. So I scrolled. And my world changed. It wasn't business language. It wasn't professional. It wasn't neutral. It was intimate. Private. Emotional. Words no one should write to someone who isn't their spouse. They talked about late nights. About how risky it was. About how exciting it felt. About how careful they had to be. They joked about hiding in plain sight. They joked about me. Not cruelly. Casually. Like I was a background character. Like I wasn't a person. Just an obstacle. A complication. I felt my hands shaking. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't sad yet. I was empty. Like something had been removed from inside me without my permission. I scrolled further. And then I saw his name. The CEO. The man who sat 3 seats away from me in board meetings. The man who shook my hand every morning. The man who asked about my weekend. The man who smiled at my wife in a way I had stopped noticing, because I trusted him. Every message connected. Every late meeting. Every delayed call. Every working dinner. It all made sense now. And that realization was worse than the discovery. Because it meant the signs had been there. I just didn't want to see them. I wanted to confront her immediately. To walk into the room. To hold up the laptop. To ask her why. But I didn't. Because something inside me told me this wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. And if she was willing to lie to me about this, she was willing to do much more. So instead of confronting her, I started watching. Quietly. Carefully. I paid attention to patterns. To timing. To behavior. I started noticing when they were in the office at the same time. When they left at the same time. When their schedules mysteriously aligned. I checked meeting rooms. They booked the same ones. Often late. Often private. I checked expense reports. Dinners that didn't involve clients. Hotels charged to business travel. Trips that overlapped. And then I checked something else. The building access logs. The one system almost no one ever looks at. But I managed operations. I knew where everything lived. So I looked. Her card. His card. Same nights. Same hours. Same floors. Sometimes the same room. That's when the emotional betrayal turned into something else. Not just cheating. Abuse of power. Abuse of company resources. Abuse of trust, not only mine, but everyone's. They weren't just hiding their relationship. They were using the company to protect it. Using company time. Company money. Company authority. And that meant, this wasn't just personal anymore. It was dangerous. Because people who mix power and secrecy will always protect the secrecy first. Even if it means destroying someone else. I understood then that I wasn't just a husband being betrayed. I was a problem they would eventually need to remove. And once I understood that, fear replaced sadness. Not panic. Not terror. A cold, focused fear. The kind that makes you alert. The kind that makes you careful. The kind that makes you survive. So I started collecting evidence. Quietly. Systematically. Every email. Every log. Every receipt. Every overlap. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I would need it. Because something told me. This wasn't going to end with a confession. It was going to end with a decision. And I wasn't going to let that decision be made without me. Not again. Not silently. Not helplessly. 3 days later. On Christmas Eve. She made her move. But that is the next part. Christmas Eve always used to feel warm. Not because of the weather. Because of what it represented. Family. Forgiveness. Endings that felt gentle. That year, it felt like an execution date. I woke up early. Not because I was excited. Because I hadn't slept. When you know something bad is coming but you don't know exactly what it is, your body refuses to rest. I watched her get dressed. Professional. Calm. Perfect. She moved like someone who had already made a decision. She kissed me goodbye. A normal kiss. Which somehow felt worse than no kiss at all. Because it meant she could pretend. And I still couldn't. On the drive to the office, the city looked peaceful. Lights in windows. People carrying gifts. Music floating from shops. The world was celebrating while mine was quietly ending. I didn't know how yet. I just knew it was. When I arrived, my badge didn't work. Just once. Then again. Then finally it opened. A small delay. A warning. I didn't understand it then. I do now. My assistant messaged me. HR wants to see you immediately. Not good morning. Not Merry Christmas. Just that. My stomach dropped. I walked past desks where people were laughing, sharing cookies, wearing ugly sweaters. I felt invisible among them. Like I was already gone. The HR conference room was cold, bright, empty, except for two people. The head of HR, and my wife. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge me as her husband, only as an object that had arrived. The HR manager began reading from a document. Her voice was neutral, practiced, safe. Due to concerns raised in an internal review, you are being placed on temporary suspension effective immediately. Suspension. The word felt unreal. Like it didn't belong to me. Like it belonged to someone else. I asked what the concerns were. The HR manager looked at my wife. My wife nodded slightly. Permission. That's when I understood. This wasn't our decision. This was hers. They told me I was being removed from my role. From access. From systems. From communication. I was to return my badge. My laptop. My phone. I was to leave the building immediately. And I was not to contact anyone internally. Not my team. Not my partners. Not even my assistant. I looked at her. At the woman I had built everything with. I asked her one question. Why? She didn't answer directly. She said, it's necessary. Necessary. Not true. Not fair. Not right. Necessary. Power always speaks in that language. It doesn't justify. It declares. I wanted to scream. To expose everything. To say his name. To tell HR. To burn it all down in that room. But I didn't. Because I saw something in her eyes. Not guilt. Not shame. Control. She wasn't afraid. She was prepared. She had planned this. Which meant if I reacted emotionally, I would lose. So I stayed calm. I nodded. I signed. I stood up. I returned my badge. And I walked out. People stared. Not with judgment. With confusion. They didn't know. They just knew something strange was happening. I packed my things into a cardboard box. 10 years of work reduced to objects. A notebook. A photo. A mug. A pen. A plant someone gave me on my first promotion. That hurt more than the suspension. Because it made everything feel disposable. Like I had been disposable. When I stepped outside, it was snowing. Softly. Beautifully. The kind of snow that makes everything feel quiet. Clean. Forgiving. And I stood there with my box. Feeling like I had just been erased from my own life. That was the betrayal. Not the affair. Not the lies. Not even the suspension. It was the decision to remove me without conversation. Without honesty. Without respect. To use authority instead of truth. Power instead of love. She didn't confront me. She didn't confess. She didn't explain. She replaced me. Silently. Legally. Cleanly. That was the moment I stopped being her husband. And became her risk. That night, she didn't come home early. She didn't text. She didn't ask where I was. She didn't care. She had done what she needed to do. She had neutralized the problem. And she believed she had won. But what she didn't understand was that she had only removed me from the building. Not from the truth. Not from the story. Not from the consequences. Because while she was celebrating her freedom, I was understanding something very important. She had shown me who she really was. Not a bad person. Not a monster. but someone who would always choose power when forced to choose between power and people. And that meant she was predictable. And predictable people can be stopped. So I went home. I didn't drink. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I sat alone in silence. And planned. Because heartbreak is loud. But strategy is quiet. And I was done being loud. Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Silence. Patience. That's what mine looked like. While everyone else was celebrating the holidays, I was sitting in a quiet apartment with a laptop, a notebook, and the truth. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is messy. Anger makes mistakes. I felt focused. Because now I understood the game. And once you understand the game, you stop being emotional about the players. You just play better. I started by organizing everything I had saved. Emails. Access logs. Expense reports. Calendar overlaps. Meeting room bookings. Travel records. It wasn't about the affair anymore. No one in power truly cares about who sleeps with whom. They care about liability. They care about misuse of funds. They care about exposure. So I framed the truth in the only language power respects. Risk. I built a timeline. Not a story. A structure. Date. Time. Action. Policy violated. Evidence attached. Over and over again. Clear. Boring. Deadly. Every late-night meeting booked as private strategy but held in a hotel. Every expense labeled client dinner, but attended by 2 executives and no clients. Every access log showing after-hours entry without authorization. Every system they touched that they weren't supposed to. I didn't accuse. I didn't describe emotions. I didn't tell anyone she cheated on me. I told them the company had been exposed to serious legal and financial risk. That's what they listened to. I sent it to the board. Not all at once. Quietly. Formally. Through the correct channel. I didn't even include my name in the first message. Just the evidence. Because truth doesn't need a signature. It just needs light. Then I waited. That was the hardest part. Because waiting feels like weakness. But it isn't. Waiting is pressure. Pressure that builds slowly. Silently. Unavoidably. I imagined her in meetings. Confident. Untouchable. Believing she had solved her problem. Believing she had protected her secret. Not knowing that the very structure she trusted was now examining her. I didn't watch. I didn't interfere. I didn't push. I let the system do what systems do when faced with risk. Investigate. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Then I got the first message. Not from her. From a board member. Short. Formal. We are conducting a review. We may need to speak with you. That was it. No apology. No sympathy. Just process. And process was exactly what I wanted. They asked me to walk them through the evidence. I did. Calmly. Slowly. Without bitterness. I wasn't a betrayed husband anymore. I was a concerned former executive explaining a risk profile. That made them trust me. They didn't see emotion. They saw credibility. Then the questions began. More documents. More explanations. More confirmations. They weren't looking for a villain. They were looking for exposure. And they found it. I never celebrated. Not when the investigation expanded. Not when the COO was placed on leave. Not when rumors started. Because celebration is loud. And I needed quiet. Eventually, the message came. She was removed as CEO. Officially for breach of fiduciary duty. Not for the affair. Not for the betrayal. For the misuse of power. For putting the company at risk. That was the irony. She lost her position not because she was unfaithful, but because she was careless with power. The COO resigned before termination. I imagine his resignation letter was full of excuses. full of justifications, full of reasons. But none of that mattered. The board didn't care why. They cared that it happened. That was enough. People messaged me. Old colleagues. Employees. Friends. They said they were sorry. They said they didn't know. They said they always wondered. I thanked them. And I let it go. Because closure doesn't come from being right. It comes from being done. I didn't return to the company. I didn't want the past to define the future. So I built something new. Not out of revenge. Out of clarity. I started my own firm. Smaller. Cleaner. Honest. Clients followed. Because trust is portable. People follow integrity. Not titles. Not buildings. Not logos. They follow people. And I was finally free to be one again. Not a role. Not a function. Not a subordinate. Just a person. She never contacted me. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not to ask for forgiveness. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she still thought she was right. It didn't matter. Because I no longer needed her story. I had my own. And it was quiet. And it was strong. And it was mine. The hardest part of betrayal is not the moment it happens. It's what comes after. The silence. The questions. The nights when you replay everything, looking for signs you missed, mistakes you made, and moments you could have changed. I spent weeks like that, walking around my apartment in the quiet, watching the city outside my window, snow melting in the streets, lights blinking in offices that were still open even on Christmas Eve. I asked myself questions I didn't have answers for. Why did she do it? Was it me? Was it something I could have stopped? Something I could have fixed? But I realized the truth. It wasn't about me. It was about her. Her desire for control. Her fear of exposure. Her willingness to protect herself at all costs. And that's when I understood the most important lesson of betrayal. When someone betrays you, it's not about you. It's about them. And their choices. And their limitations. I couldn't change her choices. I couldn't change what happened in those late-night hotel rooms or secret emails. I couldn't undo the suspension. I couldn't reclaim that Christmas Eve. But I could control what I did next. I could decide how I would respond. And that's when the anger, the hurt, the fear, all of it, started to transform. I channeled it into strategy, into clarity, into rebuilding. Because revenge isn't about shouting. It's about positioning. It's about quiet power. It's about using facts, systems, and truth to let consequences fall where they must. I didn't go back to my old office. I didn't beg anyone to reinstate me. I didn't argue with the media or post about betrayal online. I built a new company. Not a competitor. Not a rival. Something small. Something clean. Something built on integrity and trust. I contacted a few loyal clients personally. Explained nothing. Promised everything. And they followed. Employees who knew me well reached out. They offered to join me. Because trust doesn't vanish when the title disappears. Slowly, the company grew. Smaller at first. Careful. Thoughtful. But growing in ways that felt solid. Real. Mine. And while she had lost her position, her authority, her reputation, I realized that I had gained something far more valuable. Freedom. Freedom to be myself. Freedom to make decisions without fear of betrayal. Freedom to work with people who valued honesty over secrecy. Freedom to build something from the ground up that I could fully believe in. I walked into my new office one morning, sunlight pouring through the windows, and I felt a weight lift. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need the title she had tried to take from me. All I needed was clarity. And with clarity comes power. Not the kind that comes from a corner office or a big paycheck. Not the kind that comes from control over others. The kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will not allow in your life ever again. I thought about her often in those first months. Not with hatred, not with longing, but with awareness. Aware of what she had done. Aware of the lessons she had forced me to learn. And the biggest lesson? That life doesn't end when betrayal happens. It doesn't even slow down. It keeps moving. And if you let it, it can lift you higher than you ever imagined. I started sleeping again. I started exercising. I started traveling. Not to escape the past, but to remind myself that life is bigger than one person's choices. Every time I walked into a meeting, every time I signed a new client, every time I saw my team succeed, I reminded myself, I didn't just survive. I thrived. I didn't just expose a secret. I rebuilt a life. And every decision, every action I took was guided by integrity. Because integrity is the one thing betrayal cannot touch. It can't be erased. It can't be stolen. It can't be suspended. And it became my compass. Months later, I realized something else. I wasn't just stronger. I wasn't just wiser. I was free from illusion. From love that pretended. From trust that was conditional. From people who valued power over partnership. I had regained what really mattered. Not a marriage. Not a title. Not a position in a company. But peace. And when you have that, everything else is just detail. I never reached out to her. She didn't contact me either. And that was okay. Because our story had ended. Not with drama. Not with confrontation. Not with public humiliation. But quietly. With me standing tall. With a future that I had carved with my own hands. And every time I think about that Christmas Eve, every time I replay the moment of suspension, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity. I feel direction. I feel power. And that power is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't brag. It just exists. And it guides me. Every new hire. Every new client. Every new project. Every decision I make. I know who I am. I know what I will accept. I know what I will not. And that knowledge, that quiet strength, is more valuable than any CEO title. Because at the end of the day, betrayal can take your office. Betrayal can take your role. Betrayal can take your family's celebration. But it cannot take your integrity. It cannot take your clarity. It cannot take your future. I am living proof of that. And I will carry that lesson forward for the rest of my life. Because life does not wait. It does not forgive. It does not pause for betrayal. It moves forward. And so must you. And when you do, you realize something profound. You are stronger than you ever imagined. You are smarter than the deceivers. And you are free, truly free, to build the life you deserve. And that, more than anything else, is the greatest revenge. The life you rebuild, the trust you keep, the integrity you uphold. That is your victory.